It's time for the Wrestling Perspective podcast. That guy is Lars Frederiksen. I'm Dennis Farrell. We have John Hennigan coming up here in a few minutes with MLW. We can't wait. But little Birdie told us your favorite segment is the questions, and we've got them all. So we're going to get to them. You like that? Little Birdie told me.
Yeah.
I did
What
get
kind of bird is it? Is it a fucking vulture?
it's a Sean Ross Sapp bird. He told me he's gotten a few emails about how our segments here, the question and answer segments, is people's favorite. So
okay,
you got to give them what they want. Maybe we'll just bump John Hennigan and answer questions all night. That's
we can't do that because John Hennigan is one of my good friends. Well, he's a good friend. He's a friend. He's a friend.
One of them.
And yes, and I wouldn't bump John. We're not David Letterman, Dennis.
Thank God.
I just want to let you know that Rancid got bumped for the Dave Matthews Band on David Letterman.
Oh man!
So, I mean, if it was like Kiss or like Slayer, cool. But Dave Matthews, bro, come on.
No one's ever heard of him after that, anyways, right?
No, but kudos to Dave Matthews. Go ahead. Anyways, go ahead.
Let's hit some questions. Jake from Lansing, Michigan. I seen Lars tweet a few weeks ago about the AEW video game. Is he a gamer? I think you are, Dennis. Of course, I'm a fucking gamer, but do you game?
I do, but most of the games that I like. I like
Candy Crush.
No. But I play Magic the Gathering. Okay. And I play that through like my iPhone. I love that game. My kids turned me on to it, and so I play that game. But like as far as like PlayStation games, the wrestling games I'll play. Some of this like FIFA I'll play. Like I love like Friday the 13th, or I love how they're putting out those old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like for me, I enjoy it, but it's not. I'm gonna sit down and watch an old kung fu movie from the 70s before I'm gonna turn the PlayStation on.
Okay.
Which I've been doing a lot of as of recent. Mike Speedball Bailey, honestly, has really got me to fall in love with my kung fu movie collection again.
That's awesome. I like that. It's funny because sometimes we make friends with these guys after, like Court Bauer and I text back and forth, which kind of blows my mind sometimes. And you leave out of a podcast going, maybe I'll hear from this guy. And sometimes, we make friends with these guys. Sometimes we don't. But like, I'll sit there and go, wow, why is Brody King sending me texts about playing Call of Duty or something?
I literally was just with Brody King and Danhausen today. Last night we went and had dinner because they're AEW's in town, San Francisco, and just was with them today because they wanted to go to a dim sum spot, and then we went to a toy store, and they're just normal dudes. Like, I mean, they're just like nerds like us. I mean, you can't be if you're a professional wrestler and you're not a nerd, then you're probably not good at your job.
Which I love talking to the older and younger guys about that change in the locker room from playing video games to like our drinking and driving drunk and those old stories of the old,
Well, I will say, like, I don't know if you caught AEW on Wednesday night, but Christian's promo was probably one of the best promos that I've ever seen in recent days, because it's true. I think what he was saying, there was so much truth in it. And, I do feel like modern day wrestlers, from what I understand, and, when I've sort of been around, they don't want to, they do treat certain aspects of the business as a video game. And I think that some of the best wrestling stories have been always one part truth. So I'm hoping that people understand how awesome that was.
All right, Joey wants to know, how do you both feel about matches, about championship matches not closing out pay-per-views? I'm okay with it as long as it makes sense.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know, like, if it's a big match and there's no championship involved and the story's greater than the championship, I feel like that would be your main event. I don't necessarily know if one thing has to be a main event. I feel like maybe the biggest angle that's going on generally is the main event. Unfortunately, there's not really, a lot of storytelling that's happening in wrestling. I think there's a couple things we can pull out of each. Well, I can't even fucking go that far. I'd say Impact is probably the best storytelling wrestling, the purest wrestling show. I would say MLW is on par with that too. I mean, when you think about the WWE, the only storyline that you've had from there is the Bloodline. That's been worth any kind of shit. And that took Sami Zayn, right, to make it interesting for me. And I've said that the whole time. AEW, I don't think there really is a story I mean, the story that people follow is like from the media scrum on. That's the story that everybody's interested in. That company is like, you know, who's stabbing who in the back this week, like, or some shit like that. So, which is real life. So it's not even playing out on their TV, I don't know.
I kid you not, the next question on my phone is from Amanda from Cincinnati. All the new rage of wrestling is media scrums. How do you feel about wrestling organizations having media scrums after pay-per-views?
Okay, we're talking. Well, here's the thing, and this is the context you have to look into. So you're having a media scrum about an entertainment. It's not an actual. It's a sporting event in the sense that the wrestlers are athletes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing a media scrum as if it was like a fight or an MMA thing or a baseball game or a football game or whatever it is, right? But we're having a media scrum on something that's predetermined. That's a show, okay? And then you're hosting a bunch of wrestling journalists, okay? So that in itself is sort of like a oxymoron in a lot of ways, wrestling journalism. So I feel like, because there's a fine line, because I mean, some dirt sheet writers print rumor, so there could be not one speck of fact to what they're putting out on paper, but they still put it out there. So that's not really being a journalist, right? A journalist is somebody who actually finds the facts, gets it validated from more than one source, and then goes to print. Wrestling journalists, if you want to call them that, don't really do that. They sort of print the rumor, right? So they're getting it. They maybe get a call from whoever maybe, right? And then they're saying, well, this is what happened. And that's this guy's perspective on something that happened or whatever it is. And so I don't necessarily know. I mean, even Dave Meltzer got, sort of catfished when it came to his wrestling journalism, somebody pretending to be somebody from Japan, a wrestler. And it turned out that he was, getting fucking, raped, around it. So it's like, it's I don't know if you can take it. I don't think it's a credible source of information. And I feel like I don't know. I don't think any news outlet is a credible, place for information. But you know what I'm saying? It's like,
I could do without it. Honestly, it's, we all know what wrestling is and why we watch it. I'm not going to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes after I watch something on TV to have to hunt it down on YouTube or wherever it's airing at that point and sit down and watch. I can go listen to everybody has a podcast. I'll go listen to everybody's podcast a day later if I really want to hear something in the media scrum, because they're not going to tell you anything in it.
No, and I think that, I always come from the place, believe half of what you see and nothing of what you hear. And I think that you're pretty safe when you're in that place listening to news. Most of the truths that I know about professional wrestling have never been printed. Okay. So I'm either getting it firsthand from the person that was there or both people that were there. And I'm not going to, I'm not really one of those guys who's going to air somebody else's dirty laundry. Like, it's clear to see who in the business of professional wrestling is the ones that you can trust and the ones that you can't trust. It's pretty clear to see. Is the other part of this rumor and falsehood and all this stuff, is that part of the entertainment now? Absolutely. So I can say, for instance, I ran into Doink the Clown in a urinal, and he put a bottle of vodka on Doink the Clown, sorry, God rest your soul. But you know what I'm saying? Like, and I can go out and print this, he must be a drunk or whatever it is, right? Just because, and I don't even, but I only saw him put something up there. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It's just, right. It's all pretty like, the entertainment part of wrestling is also the rumor and the sound bites and these things. I mean, we contribute to that as well here. But the one thing that I think that we try to do that maybe differentiate us from like a dirt sheet is anything that is newsworthy is coming actually out of the wrestler's mouth firsthand. And we're also getting that human interest. I would think the human interest story. I want to know the person behind this thing, right? So that's the difference between what we do and then what like a wrestling news site does, or a wrestling dirt sheet, I should say. I stand corrected. So, the news is when the guy's talking. Now, whether or not he's being honest with us or not, Dennis, that's beyond our control. But if my man, says something, and or my lady, whatever, they say something, then they're responsible for what they said.
Right. Listen, we'll get to the rest of the emails next week. We're running short this time. I know it's everybody's favorite, but listen,
I went long-winded too.
Yeah, well, we've got Johnny Wrestling Perspective podcast coming on next, so stay tuned. He'll be right back with us, and yeah, we can't wait. Hey, we are back with the Wrestling Perspective, Lars Frederiksen and myself, John Hennigan, MLW, joining us. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Last time you were on the podcast, Lars wasn't here. It was me and Petey Williams. Sadly, Lars took a step down in his career to join the podcast, and Petey went to WWE. So things work out for some people.
I mean, it works out for me. I get to talk to Lars, and good for Petey too,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm the only friend that hopes he gets fired so he can come back to a shitty podcast.
So you can have your friend back.
Yeah, that's kind of how that works in the wrestling business,
Yeah.
But listen, let's start out the questioning. I listen to a lot of your interviews. I'm a big fan of yours, and is that we all over our phones?
I guess that just happened.
Yeah.
Like my phone calls go to the computer. Oh, got it.
But when you were on last time, you talked about your different incarnations of your name, and I went back, listened to the podcast again, and in all your interviews, no one ever asks you, when you sit down with the company, they bring you in and they say, you know what, this week you're going to be Johnny WWE Entertainment or Johnny Impact or Johnny whatever. Do you kind of roll your eyes and go, can we do something different, guys? Do I really need to be Johnny, whatever the name of the show is?
You know what? Like, I did for a little while, but now it's gone on so long that it's kind of taken on this campy, weird factor that I enjoy a little bit. And when you first start wrestling, or when I did at least, like I made this huge list of all these cool names, like Ulysses Laser Balls and whatever, like all this crap, right? You think about all the puns and all the stuff that you can make out of your names. And then after you do it for a while, you realize, like, I mean, that's like very superficial, scratching the surface. No one really cares what your name is. They want you, like the story you're going to tell, how you're going to move, what you're going to do. So Johnny Podcast, Johnny Fusion, Johnny Underground, John Hennigan, my real name is what I'm doing in MLW for the first time in a long time. It doesn't bother me at all. And there's sometimes when like some promoter is like, I think you should be Johnny Promoter, because that's the name of our promotion. What do you think? And I'm always like, that's a great idea. Glad you thought of that. Let's do that. That's why you're a promoter. Man, you're smart.
Well, you know, John, like you've been pretty much everywhere and anywhere, you know what I mean? And you've obviously, you know, held a certain level of, you know, respect in the business of professional wrestling. It's like you're not going to be the guy that's not going to have a job. Um, do you feel like all this experience that you've acquired over this last, I mean, how long have I known you now? Like 12, 13 years, you know?
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. Yeah.
You know, and it's like you've been in like 18 different companies, and you know you've done it all, and you've been back to some of these, you know, and it's almost like you're a journeyman, like an old great ball player, you know what I mean? So you can be put into any situation and it will work. um do you attribute that from all the places that you worked, or do you think it's just something that your style has allowed you to do?
I think both, because I would say I just stayed with WWE for this entire time. I would still have like a specific set of skills and be the journeyman ball player. Um, I would probably be able to adapt almost anywhere, but because I've worked in Mexico and the UK and all these different companies with different styles, I've had a lot more exposure and experience with all those things. So the variety of tools in the toolkit that I'm accustomed to using is definitely more. Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think anyone who sticks it out in any business, especially in entertainment, is forced to figure out how to evolve and should really enjoy doing it. And I do. Like, I've got a match on Saturday against Ninja Mac. Never wrestled the guy. He's got a very specific style. I've watched him, but like, what am I going to do against Ninja Mac? And to me, that's a fun question. Like figuring it out and thinking of stuff like kind of like martial arts tricking, like a lot of independent, like quick, like acrobatic stuff. Like, how do I combat that? Do I try to match it? Do I counter it? Like, there's no wrong answer. As long as you're interested, then I think the crowd's going to be interested in what you do.
I had dinner the other night with a professional wrestler. I'm not going to say his name because this isn't going to bode well for him. And we're talking about where he's been, what he does, how does he prepare, and all that stuff. And he's like, I just go out and do it at this point. I don't even care. When you travel so much as you have, and now you're starting to wrestle guys like a Ninja Mac that you've not seen before, do you sit down and go over the film or tape, or do you go, I've been everywhere, I can get in there and I can do it? How do you prepare now for matches with guys that you haven't seen?
So believe it or not, I've been YouTubing Ninja Mac.
I believe it because
I it's literally like interesting to me. And thinking of like, it helps me think of different things that I could potentially use to counter or ways that I could work with him. And whether or not that ends up happening is irrelevant kind of to like my preparation, because I really like doing that. So it's motivating because I know this is happening, whether I prepare or not. Like this on Saturday, it is happening. I can make it as good as I can, or I can not care and just show up. It really sucks to just show up and be somewhere you don't want to be. So, and it's not easy to like take the other path and like be really passionate and care all the time, especially when sometimes like the promotion you work for doesn't care about you. But I like fight hard to stay in that mind space.
Well, that's one of the things that I think that when I was going back and in you know, compared you to like a journeyman ball player, it was out of respect in the sense because I've seen the way that you know, talking to you now is completely different than talking to you 12 years ago. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So your level of maturity obviously is far beyond you know, where you were at that time. And when you talk about it,
I was in that bubble. You know, that's all I had experienced,
right,
and I was younger. Yeah,
exactly. And you were still kind of figuring it out and learning it. And now it's like I see you and it's so fluid. You can get in there and be so fluid with anybody, right? So um Ninja Mac, for instance, like I know his work pretty well, and it's all over the place, but it has elements of what you have done in your career. Um being the more mature now, elder statesman, sort of ring general, whatever you want to call it, like, do you go in there and say, hey, Ninja, I think we can do this, this, and this, and this, or are you following his lead? I mean, how do you approach, a guy that you've never worked for? Are you feeling like you
always ask them first, like, what do you have in mind? Because if I feel like if I go in and say, let's do these 5 things, usually that's what we'll do. And if someone says no, then I'm like, for some reason, like, getting offended, even though I shouldn't. But you know what I mean? I want someone else's ideas. It's like if you ever get sick of listening to your own playlists on Spotify, like, I've heard my playlist. I want to hear someone else's and then add to it, subtract, or maybe that they have an idea I never even thought of that we should do, and then take that and then add. Because if you go in there constantly like, this is going to be John's greatest hits, the same greatest hits I've been playing for 20 years, that's when, I think that's when, like, guys show up and are like, I'm just here to get paid and head home, or whatever. Yeah. And then I think it might be time to retire if that's your mentality, or just find something you're passionate about, whatever that is.
Has that always been your attitude, or has it changed the longer you've been in the industry?
Honestly, like, it comes in waves. There's definitely days where I like show up, I'm like, I hate this job, I hate my life choices. Why did I decide to be a pro wrestler? But I try to, like, keep in that positive mind space and, like, the creative, and keep it as, like, a creative challenge. And for the most part, yes, but like nobody honestly can say that they're always positive. That's not how people work.
No, I think it's human nature to kind of go back and forth, right? It's like, we both do pretty cool gigs, and it's like some days you're just, you're a human fucking being, right? Sometimes you just don't want to be in fucking Columbus, Ohio. Nothing against Columbus, Ohio, or wherever you are,
It doesn't exactly. Even like New York, like,
yeah, I
was in London last week, and like, I forget who they said I was going to London for a show, and I think my sister was like, "Oh my God, you're going to London!" I was like, "Yeah, but like, I'm flying to London for like a day, and then I'm flying home. This isn't a vacation."
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like I always tell people, I've been a million places and seen zero. You know what I mean? It's like, unless you got a day off or something like that, but even the days off, you're just trying to catch up on sleep and trying to get some nutrition in you. You know what I mean? Or
so no, 100% right.
Well, but that's, I guess, the life that we chose.
I can tell you about gyms in Melbourne.
In Tokyo. Right. But I remember one time I went to Tokyo and they wouldn't let me into the gym because I had tattoos. Yeah.
You got to cover up.
I know. And it's like, well, I can't cover it up. It's on my face,
Yeah.
So we've seen now, you kind of came in like at the cusp when I would say the business started to change, right? It became a little bit less about psychology. It was the psychology changed, I should say. The storytelling aspect changed in a lot of ways, and it became more sort of influenced by independent wrestling, right? And you kind of were like there when as it was changing, and now you're seeing it that we have so many different promotions. You got AEW out on, which is like an indie show in a lot of ways. You've got Impact Wrestling, you've got MLW, you've got WWE, of course. We probably will always have that. There's now Japanese companies that have American exposure on American TV channels. There's so much for GCW. The list goes on and on and on and on. You can consume wrestling anytime that you want, 7 days a week, 24/7.
Literally.
How do you still keep up with wrestling? Like, are you still like a fan? Are you still like, I still kind of watch this certain show, or is it more like my opponent, I'm going to watch his shit and that's about as far as I'm going to go?
To the extent that I can be a fan, yeah. Like, if I say like the final of the best of 7 matches between the Lucha Brothers and the Elite on AEW, I had to watch. Like, And there's just certain matches that some, like a friend of mine will say, like, dude, you got to check out like Omega versus Osprey, like, or whatever it is, like, and I'll do that. But like you said, if you tried to watch all the wrestling that's out there, I mean, that literally would be 27, like, or 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's so much out there.
Yeah.
But
Well, speaking
it's
of,
tough because I am a fan of it, and like I like pick and choose what I watch though.
well, all this wrestling, you're with MLW now, and they've been amazing to us. We're big fans of theirs. And they do this new kind of a mold together now with like a Lucha Underground, which, I'm a Lucha Underground nerd. I love that show.
Me too.
When you come into MLW, you see this kind of the hybrid of it. Are you in your mind hoping that they may tend to go a little bit more Lucha Underground, because the storytelling, the production, it was something we've not seen in wrestling at that time, and they tease us right now with it in MLW just so much more. It's almost like, just show me your boobs, I want to see it all. When you go in,
here's the thing. So honestly, like, Lucha Underground will be near impossible to replicate, because that was an hour-long drama on the El Rey network with a sizable budget. And really what that means is time, right? So we shot the vignettes in Lucha Underground like a TV show, like an episodic, with takes and angles, which is why it looked like how it did. Most promotions don't have either the money or the time. If you're a smaller promotion, you don't have the money, and if you're WWE or AEW, you're live, right? So you don't really have the time to like do something and then edit it in post and then put it out there. With MLW, I love that they have Cesar Duran, known as Dario Cueto. Real dude's name is Luis. He's a fantastic actor. I mean, and also like a really good dude. I'll sidetrack and tell a quick story about him. Me, Taya, and him, and this girl he was dating, we're going on this double date because he tells us he has a sailboat and he knows how to sail. Parked in Marina Del Rey. When's the last time you sailed, Luis? Oh, I've had the boat 3 years, but I haven't sailed it in, maybe 2 years. Okay. So somehow, like, he hits like 3 boats on the way out of Marina Del Rey, like just like little fun. His date is like, oh my, like freaking out the whole time. I think it's hilarious. Ty is laughing. Then, like, the channel to get out to the open water is like a football, 100 yards. We get pinned up against the rocks somehow. And now, like, Taya is like yelling at all these fishermen in Spanish, and they're trying to push us off with their fishing poles. And Luis is like trying to like calm his date down, and keeps going like, we're having a good time, right? Everybody's having a good time. This is fun, right? And the Coast Guard shows up. I jumped off the boat and was trying to push it off the rocks with my feet to save like the hull from getting punctured. And they towed us off, and like we went out sailing. The girl he brought like stayed below deck and cried. And then the other 3 of us were up there. We had some shots and just had kind of a really nice day. I guess it doesn't really have much to do with him, aside from just being an adventurous, like, fun guy to be around. But he takes his craft very seriously, and that's storytelling, acting. So he lends a lot of authenticity. What he needs to be used effectively is a good story, and a story that like has continuity and just doesn't like end or change for some reason. Like, for some reason happens at all these places that have plenty of money and should be able to afford at least writers or have the means to pay off their storylines. So with him as an asset, I think he elevates whoever he's on the screen with. And with MLW, yeah, I am hoping that like they kind of can go more that way, with the knowledge that there's no way that they can go as far as Lucha Underground unless they get some sort of like financial deal or big time money, because it's impossible to compete with that money.
Well, it sounds like he's really passionate about his craft, just not his watercraft.
Boom.
Sorry, I've been saving that one for the last 5 minutes. Thanks.
Did you just say that's a good one, John? You don't have to lie to him.
No, I'm not lying. I like horrible jokes. That's my line.
I mean,
Johnny Drip Drip, America's Most Wanted. Come on.
Okay, I've been saying this for a long time now. MLW, Impact Wrestling are the pure wrestling TV shows, if you like professional wrestling. And, you know, when you went over there, I really honestly thought to myself that you think of yourself as a pro wrestler, not a sports entertainer. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, except those two terms I don't distinguish between too much anymore. And it's because if you spend enough time working for WWE and you're there for the meeting that they have every year or two, where it's like, we're not damn professional wrestlers, we're sports entertainers. Nobody say pro wrestling. And then we're not sports entertainers, we're entertainers. We're just entertainers. I mean, we're all pro wrestlers or luchadors or whatever the term is. But I know what you mean, the distinction between the two. Like, there's like a certain craft that Dr. Dre said once in an interview, like when someone asked him like why he does what he does or how he creates his music, and he just said like, I just try to think of whatever will pop the house. And to me, that's like that's what pro wrestling should be. You should be trying to pop the house, and that can't just be with spots or with a flashy entrance or with like a Goldberg character that just smashes everybody. It's got to be with like a really authentic, thoughtful, relatable character used in a good story. And the more tools you have, like physically, on the mic, whatever, like the more nuanced you can make your stuff.
Right.
Last time you were on, you talked about a wrestling ring in your backyard. And here we are several years later now. Do you still have it in your backyard or a shed or wherever John Hennigan keeps a wrestling ring?
Quick answer to that one. One of my wedding vows was that we would no longer have any pro wrestling roommates, to which Luchasaurus and Super Panda stood up and said, like, hey, what are you talking about? And B, we would no longer have a wrestling ring in the backyard. So no, there's no wrestling ring in the backyard. But I honestly miss it.
Well, how does your prep now change the older you get? I've listened to a couple of interviews where you've talked about, you know, you had an injury and your sidekick was affected, and it got me thinking about how do you prep now or train? Do you still go hardcore the older you get? Do you scale it back? What's the difference now in your wrestling training?
I think it's basically just you have to train a lot more intelligently. The intensity can remain, but I don't flip onto hard surfaces anymore. Like if I go to a center, I still flip, but I'll flip onto like not even just one mat, like a mat in like a foam pit. So the landing is really soft, because even a spring floor, like I could flip on that all day when I was 20. But now, like even if I hit a flip perfectly, like at 43, I hit 20 side flips perfectly on a spring floor, I'm going to start to mess up my knees and my ankles. And I know that. But if you don't do any, then you start to lose your skill. So I think it's basically just got to be equally intense, if not more intense, which is annoying because the older you get, the harder it is to stay in shape. But far more intelligent. And like you can't take, like I don't take risks on stuff that I don't know if I can do or not. Like I don't try like a springboard shooter just for the first time in a ring. Like I might try it in a center in a foam pit if I for some reason wanted to. I don't. but I know that like even if I did hit it, I might hurt my like ankle or my knee. And if I missed it, there's a really good chance that I'd mess myself up for a really dumb reason.
Fair enough. Your last WWE run, it seemed like, you know, you were there for almost like a cup of coffee, right? And then next time that we really see you is now with MLW. Do you ever, is that like the goal for you, is like to always get back to the WWE, or is it more about being like, a creative, is it more artistry for you now, is what I'm trying to get at? Is it like, are you
It's
more
100% artistry. And like for a while, like when I left WWE the first time, it was never my goal to go back. It was in my head that I would go back one day. It's not really in my head anymore that like I need to be back in WWE ever. If like it happened for some reason, sure, maybe. But the chance to have like maybe like the handful of dream matches that I haven't had yet against who knows, like Omega or Moxley or Ibushi or people like that, or maybe even my wife in a hair versus hair match or something, like some crazy like thing like that. Like that's way more exciting to me than thinking about like I want to work here or I want to work there,
right.
Zombies. I wasn't going to bring it up, but since we talked about this, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I turn on the TV and there you are in a ring with zombies. I'm not sure if there's a question there, but do you just go, what the fuck, zombies? Guys, really? That's what we're doing here? Zombies?
That basically that's it. I heard about the match and I told Damian Priest like what we were doing, and like he like walked over to Miz and's like, man, like the fuck's John talking about? Some weird shit. Like he said we're having a zombie lumberjack match. Is he fucking with me? Is he just making what? To be honest, I loved it. Just because it's so weird and like it doesn't make any sense. But then again, like wrestling doesn't have to make sense. So we both got ate by zombies and then just came back the week after.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one else. Zombies only cared about you two guys, and that was it. Like do they roam the halls? Do you guys have to fight them off and leave them locked in, and then they come out at the? How do you?
The craziest part of that whole day was like there's this one zombie that like followed me around for like 5 minutes and kept kind of like touching me, and I didn't want to be rude, so I was finally like, get the fuck away from me, bro. And it was Scotty Too Hottie, and he was just yeah, because he had such good makeup on that I didn't know it was him, and I was trying to be really polite because I didn't know who these people were, and I knew that they had spent hours in like this prosthetic makeup stuff.
And it's fucking Scotty Too Hottie.
It's Scotty, yeah.
Oh, bro, that would have been
like got me so good that day.
That would have been so badass. Like, during match, he just busts out the worm and shit. You know what I mean? Like the zombie worm.
Yeah, opportunities. The zombies totally should have gone over.
Well, they didn't. They, but no, it's funny because it's like I think that when that happened, it was one of the most talked about things that has happened in wrestling, both either a positive way or in a negative way. And it's like, I guess that's the whole point, right? Is to try to get people talking, and maybe, that was the whole concept from the beginning. But now you're acting, you're doing movies, you're doing these things, and it's like, what's this latest thing that you're doing here?
So on our honeymoon, Ty and I wrote a script called The Iron Chic Massacre. Mm-hmm. And it's basically like we wanted to kind of like make something together, collaborate on something. I've always been a big fan of Khosrow Vaziri, aka the man known as the Iron Sheik, and I met him a bunch while I was with WWE. But there's one time in 2014 where his nephew called and asked me to push him down the red carpet of the SBs in his wheelchair, and I was kind of in a rut at the time, but of course they said, yeah, absolutely. So I'm pushing him in his wheelchair, and Sheik is having a great time. He's doing his shtick. He's yelling at people like, "Hey, reporter, I suplex you, I break your back, I make you humble." Some people know who he is. Some people don't. Like, right. But if they don't know who he is, they just see a guy in a wheelchair with all these war medals and probably assume he might be an ambassador or something, or somebody that they don't want to piss off. So right. They just deal with it, and we get done, and I'm like, man, like, he seemed like so happy all night. Like, why? Like, and I'm like, I'm not in a wheelchair. I'm fine. I'm healthy. Like, like, what is it about that? And I thought, like, is it because he likes like popping the boys? And that's one answer. But then I thought deeper, and I think really it was about him being like the best version of himself. And at heart, he's an entertainer. And that night he got to entertain his friends, me, the Megan Boys, Shad Gaspar, JTG. We were all there in this group, and he was like on fire, having a good night. And I think that's what it was. Like, he was being the best version of himself, and he really enjoyed that. And it took me, I didn't just come to that epiphany overnight. It was just me kind of thinking about that. And then, so when you think about his career, I was thinking about like, man, like, he was champion for a month in 1983, 1 month. He was an Olympic wrestler from Iran. He turned down like $1 million to break Hulk Hogan's leg instead of losing the title to him, which was in 1983. Who knows what that'd be worth now? He just and was a guy that had experienced like higher highs and lower lows than me, and is still like this like kind of like happy dude. So I think the movie kind of was a love letter to him and the business and exploring that type of thing. And there's a lot of guys, and I've been there too, that get bitter and like think about like, oh, like the old timers had it easy or this or that, without thinking like no one ever has it easy. It's always hard. It's hard for the new guys. It's hard for the guys that started. And the Iron Sheik Massacre basically kind of addresses that, but is really about a doll that becomes sentient and murders a house full of disrespectful new school wrestlers. That's a weird conclusion to jump to off that story, but that's kind of the impetus behind everything.
You just swerved me. I'm sitting here listening to this heartwarming story. I'm like, man, this is going to be so great. And then you're like, this machine kills a bunch of people.
Well, if you think about it, he's an entertainer at heart, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I don't know if a really like heartfelt, touching documentary. He does have one, by the way, of him and his life and detailing all of his deeds is what he wants. I don't know if that's what I would want. Or would you rather just have some like crazy thing that makes people laugh and is fun to watch?
I agree. And you're doing this movie, you're training for boxing. You are the MLW national champion. Do you worry? Now I'm going to jump into boxing because you've been training for it, and I'm excited to see how that goes. But you see a lot of these athletes, they jump into another sport, doesn't quite go as well for them, and then it affects their wrestling career. Do you worry that whatever happens in that boxing ring, whether you win or lose, could affect how you're seen in the wrestling industry to fans?
I think it'll definitely affect how I'm seen. But the nice thing about wrestling is if I completely embarrass myself and get destroyed, I probably get pretty good heat when I show up. And if I win, then I don't know. Actually, if I win, I don't know if people are gonna like give me a standing ovation for winning in a YouTube boxing event anyway. But personally, like I don't want to lose because I've been training for this thing, and it would hurt the ego to lose. But I'm not too worried about how it'll affect my career.
You know, I just saw your wife wrestle last weekend in Impact, and you know, you guys are in two different companies doing your craft.
She's an MLW too.
Well, I thought she was
both.
Yeah, she's both.
Yeah. So my point, what I was trying to get at is like being married to a professional wrestler. Was this something that you feel like you needed? This is kind of like the perfect partnership. You know what I mean? Is as far as like, well, she kind of understands what I do, what I am. I mean, is that part of the thing that makes it work?
I know exactly what you mean. Yes, but there's like pros and cons, right? Like I can talk to her about specifics of wrestling psychology and bounce ideas off her in a way that most people can't with their partner. But sometimes there's no separation, like no time off if we're together all the time, or we're on the same Australia tour, which is great. But sometimes like you want your own space. I've dated wrestlers before her and people outside the business, and they both worked, but for some reason with her, it worked out the best because our histories were so different that I feel like we had very different views and ways that we got into the business, and we had something in common, clearly wrestling, and enough like out of common that it felt like we were both kind of like living our own dreams that overlap, but they're also kind of different.
Well, I the reason why I asked that question is because we've had wrestlers who are married, obviously Jordan Grace, Jonathan Gresham, you know, and it's always curious to me because, you know, I don't necessarily know if I'd want to date another musician, like, you know what I mean? So, but
100%. And like,
but
I've also realized like, the last thing that she wants to hear from me is a critique on like her match. Yeah, and like I might have some valid points, and she has some valid points on my matches.
Right.
But like when we're finally back at the hotel room, like I don't feel like laying down in bed and having her say like, you know, like when you kicked out of that falsie, your shoulders weren't all the way up, and then you kind of like laid there for a little bit too long. No, I don't want to analyze anything anymore. Like this is time to just like chill and relax.
right.
And yeah, it's tricky, and I think it's a balancing act. But as long as like both people are on the same page of like, you know, like we're people first, wrestlers second, then you're okay.
Right. And I know that it's a superficial question to ask because obviously there's friendship and love there. It has to be, and otherwise it doesn't work. Period. Doesn't matter what your profession is. It's just always curious to me. But then again, Dennis.
So, anyways, do you we talked about your wrestling career, you're venturing out into all these other projects. What do you see your wrestling career going forward now? Is like producing something that interests you, or when you're done with wrestling and we're not going to see you show up for 19 last match, John Hennigan last matches, or this month? Yeah.
I've got it. You know what he could do? He could come back to every company and wrestle under the moniker. You get what I'm saying? So he could have 150.
John Morrison's final match.
Yes.
Johnny Impact's final match. Yeah.
Johnny Promoter, bro.
Yep. Well, now I got to figure it out. Anything that you get good at, I mean, you get like trapped in a way because I'm not as good at anything as I am at professional wrestling. I haven't spent as much time doing anything as I have professional wrestling, like thinking about it, practicing it, doing it. And there's an expiration date on your body because it's a physical activity. If I distill down what I like about it the most, I really enjoy the physical creativity, which unfortunately won't be able to go on forever. But creativity isn't something that has to go away, and neither does storytelling. So whether it's producing for wrestling or some other form of storytelling, which would be filmmaking or TV, like creating content of some kind, or maybe even some sort of like fitness training center. They're all things that are like floating around in my mind as things that I could see myself becoming passionate about. It's that question though is the toughest thing to answer.
That's why we asked it.
The first time I left WWE, I was signing at a convention. And first of all, some dude like reaches underneath like my legs and grabs my dick, and I turned it around. I was pissed.
Scotty too hotty.
Take a steak. And I was like, hey, Johnny, you got to ask yourself, what do you want? Like he just said it like that and walked off. And I was like, that had to be like the weirdest like 30 seconds because I was literally thinking that. And then like, who does that? Who like I didn't even know that well. But he really like nailed it. And like that question that you could ask to anybody, like, what do you want? Like, and it can't just be like money or power. Like it has to be like a real answer. And if you can figure that question out, like you can figure out a lot of what you should be spending your time on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, and then having Jake the Snake fucking grab you by your sack and ask you the same thing that you're thinking about. I mean, we're talking about a master of psychology here.
I know he got me.
He
How's
got
that
you,
not
bro.
in the movie?
I know. But listen, John, where can people find you? Like, what's your Instagram, Twitter? Where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at John Hennigan. That's my shoot name. On Twitter at The Real Morrison. Facebook, John Morrison. The Iron Chic Massacre is currently playing in film festivals. It'll probably be released in a few months and available on SVOD, all the streaming services and places like that. And make sure to watch Creator Clash 2 April 15th, where I'm having an officially sanctioned boxing fight against Harley from Epic Mealtime. It's the weirdest thing ever.
So the only place that I could see the Iron Sheik Massacre is by going out and trying to find it at a movie theater at this point.
At a film festival, yeah. And
Okay.
we're probably going to wind that down and then gear up for a release and putting it out somewhere. But that's another thing that we're kind of like weighing options and trying to figure out right now. Okay. It was originally designed as a pitch for a longer project, but it like snowballed into this 24-minute thing that's pretty epic and everyone really likes it. And I
can't wait to see it.
I
can't wait.
Too bad you don't know anybody that could get you like a secret link that like Fox Searchlight sends people to watch with like the watermarks on it. And
I wish I knew a guy. I wish.
That's gonna be rough. Well, but I mean,
if I find Johnny's secret link, I'll connect you guys.
Johnny's secret link, bro.
Don't forget, you can always catch him on MLW Tuesday nights, I believe, 10 p.m. on Reels. I know MLW is going to be in New York City April 6th and Philly April 8th. So we can't wait to see you. Not that neither one of us are close to Philly or New York, but you know, come to
nice thing to say.
Yeah.
But a good way to wrap up the show.
I'm just, the one thing is like, that's the thing with MLW. It's like, I come out to the West Coast. Let's go,
Yeah.
Too bad Court Bauer doesn't watch this podcast. Wink, wink, wink.
Or think of all the travel you'd save on your West Coast tour.
Yeah, exactly.
At least 2 people.
Yeah.
We could just build a whole like promotion around people that
I'll do a whole hour of MLW if I don't have to fly to Philly.
Iron Man match there.
Yes. Well, thanks.
Husband, wife. Yeah, never mind. Okay.
I know the 60 minutes. Okay, last question. You and the wife in a match. What's the match? What's the stipulation and who's going over?
So it's happened twice. And basically, we've done 2 of these. Holy Matrimony, the Dirty Dishes match. She comes out and says, you promised me a lot of things when we got married. And I've noticed since we've been married, you haven't done one dish. And to prove it, I brought out the dishes. And then we carved out all the dishes. And basically, the loser has to do the winner's dishes for a year. I'm 0-2.
But hell of a dishwasher.
But yeah, that's another skill, Johnny Dishwasher.
That's
After this podcast, that's what you will be doing. we have
that's all you got, bro. We're called Lars and Dennis Career Killer.
Welcome to the show.
Well, Johnny wants to stay married too, so I guess I'll do dishes.
Johnny, suck it down.
Wow. Listen, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We truly appreciate it. We put together a list of guys we wanted. Your name was like on top of that list. Lars is like, let me make a phone call. And here you are. So we really appreciate
Glad you called,
with us.
Yeah. Thank you.